Hi everybody. Okay, here we are. Here's the proper introduction to the class and its aims and its insane syllabus and grading system. So I'll just be here in the corner, mostly looking at my screen, I'm afraid. I'm sorry about that. I have a camera off to the side, so I'll maybe look a little bit weird. But at least this way you know that I exist and I'm a person. Okay, so here we are. Let's get started with a little introduction. I wanted to say a couple of things about me. I am trained as a historian of science and of technology. My background is somewhat interdisciplinary, which probably partly explains how I ended up teaching these kinds of classes. Um, and I have a long-standing interest in what is often called, I think somewhat reductively, engaged scholarship. So I have done a lot of work teaching and outside of teaching, trying to bring my scholarly interests to other kinds of audiences, non-scholarly audiences. So those interests and that background informs the class to a certain extent. I mean, when we think about the aims of the class, we might want to think a little bit about like why we study history at all. I think, um, uh, one way to think about it is that we need to know something about the world that we came out of if we want to understand what's happening to us in the world today. So, for instance, the current crisis is informed by many kinds of historical trends and patterns and kind of resources for behavior that without an understanding of which one is likely to have an impoverished view of the crisis itself in this current moment. Um, and an important thing to remember about the project of history is that historians do not merely gather facts or like pieces of information. Instead, we create narratives, we create stories. So, it's not accidental that in some languages, in German and French and Spanish, um, the words for story and history are the same. Uh, so it's important for us to recognize, especially as we do digital history, and start to work maybe a little bit quantitatively, that the project of historical thinking is the project of crafting and creating stories that make sense, help us make sense of the world. Um, we are confronted in the current moment uh, by a set of challenges that the historical profession was not necessarily set up to deal with. Uh, on the one hand, there are these amazing opportunities that the digital age presents to us. This huge amounts of information, radically different from what was available even when I was a graduate student, say in the uh, you know early 1500s. Um, and in addition to all that information, there is a tremendous opportunity for widespread participation in the endeavor, in the historical endeavor, as in other endeavors. And so those are really amazing things that we ought to be able to take advantage of or should want to take advantage of. But there are also challenges in this new world, uh, and they take many forms. It is harder now than it used to be to filter data because we have so much of it. It's harder to know who to trust because the um, the landscape of publishing has fractured and changed in many significant ways. Um, and together, our discipline, the discipline of historians, has limited experience thinking about and understanding how to deal with these situations. Whereas in a kind of an earlier era, there was a solid 100 years of sort of collective wisdom about how to undertake historical projects. So for our class, our main project is to understand what it means to write history for a digital age, and think about what we can preserve from our past, what opportunities there are for change, and also come to understand what has already been done in this domain. So I get some sense of what the field of digital humanities and digital history have to offer us already. The method of the class is a little bit unusual. For most of us who work in this domain, digital history and the digital humanities more broadly are experimental. There really is not a canon. There aren't canonical works that you must read or must experience in this domain. Most of us also have limited technical backgrounds. There are some people working in this domain who are very, very technical, but most of us are less technical than an average web developer. And it's not clear for those of us in the class, not just for me, but especially for you, you may not know yet what you want to do for a living. In part as a result of these things, of these conditions, it would be very hard to teach this class in a single semester in a systematic way. There's a lot for us to learn, and it's a little bit hard to know what to choose to learn. So we come out of this class not as computer scientists, but as hackers in the kind of etymological or original sense of that term. We're people who cobble together what tools we can find in order to, in a kind of perhaps mercenary way, craft a medium in which we can work as we want. The emphasis is on basic concepts and practical tools. And my hope is that if you are genuinely interested in this material, that you will use that as a basis for further self-guided learning in this domain. And a lot of like the frustration and then eventually the enjoyment of this class comes from trial and error and learning how to deal with banging your head against a wall. It's a really important skill if you want to progress further, because you're going to experience that a lot. So in a sense, what I want to do is to introduce you to the toolbox of digital history. But of course, those tools are constantly changing, and so it's a little bit hard to do that. So rather than give you like a high-level set of ephemeral tools to work with, the emphasis here is on simple coding and on what we might call plumbing, like the infrastructure that might get updated but is unlikely to go away. So things like code editors, version control software, like managing changes to your code, and the absolute basics of web development. Okay, so those are some of the aims of the class. Let us talk a little bit about the syllabus. And the syllabus is long and kind of complicated and a little bit technical. It can be easy to get lost in there. I still want you to really read it, not just like skim it. But some highlights. First, if you want to succeed in this class, you need to participate. That means coming to the live synchronous classes, unless you really can't. Watching these lectures, like the one that you're watching right now. You need to join Slack, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And whether or not you can make it to the synchronous sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you need to ask questions, either live or online, asynchronously. And you need, part of participation is helping out your classmates. So I will be tracking the extent to which you offer up assistance or condolence or some kind of support to your classmates. So yeah, you got to participate. Second, you have to be willing to try stuff that you're not very comfortable with. So you got to get out of your comfort zone. You're going to find that you fail often. And if you don't get it right, that's okay, but you've got to pick yourself up and try again. And that's just going to be essential. And you will very quickly determine whether or not you feel like you have it in you to do that. Some people, just find it too frustrating. I try to tell people, if you can get past that initial frustration, it can be really, really fun. And then you gotta read the assignments carefully. I put a ton of work into these assignments, and a lot of the questions that you're likely to have are already covered somewhere in the assignment, either in the instructions or sometimes in the sort of problem set itself. And and this is a big class this year, and I'm not available in person, so it will be harder for me to answer kind of superfluous questions. So really make an effort there. And if things do not go well when you hand in an assignment, you will get pretty decent feedback from me and from the automated tests. And you got to like really look at that feedback and pay attention to it. It's really important to have a laptop. If you are watching this on your phone right now, that is gonna be really hard to do. Like you need a real computer. You know, since you're at home, maybe you have a desktop, and that would work fine. But it needs to be something that runs, you know, Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. Anything else is going to be hard to work with. So we'll be coding pretty much every class. I really also want you to stay off of all your social media. You know, it's a tough time. We all have trouble concentrating and so forth. I'm also showing up for the class. I want you to show up for the class. And this class is going to grind you down unless you figure out the parts of it that are fun for you. So look for the opportunity in the challenge. The class is fundamentally divided into 4 main blocks. In the first main block, which is called text and code, we try to understand how the web works and what the web changes about the practice of history. And we also take an intro, it gives us an intro to our tools and our infrastructure. That means the code editor, the version control software, and the tools for building our systems. So a lot of that stuff will be kind of opaque and feel frustrating, and you'll be like kind of shooting in the dark a little bit. I'm sorry, but in a way I'm not sorry, because even though that can be so frustrating, it can kind of detract from the learning experience at the beginning. You're going to have to do stuff like that all the time if you continue. And so knowing that this is just part of the deal is something worth learning. I actually am hoping to simplify some of the setup in future years, but the tools are just not there yet. They may be just a few months away, I don't know. Yeah, so also in addition to that, an introduction to HTML, hypertext markup language, and CSS, cascading style sheets, which are 2 languages that control web page structure and appearance. The second part of the course, which has the title Data-Driven History, has also similarly a set of what we might call historiographical or intellectual goals and a set of technical goals. So I want you at the end of that block to understand what the phrase distant reading means and what the problems of textual abundance are. I want you to experiment with treating text as data and to distinguish between meaning and information. And also, like, we'll spend a lot of our time focused on learning some fundamentals about the JavaScript language, which is the language that controls most dynamic events on most websites. And we won't approach this in a computer science way. You will learn some basics, and then you'll like try to do what you can with those basics. And there are 2 final blocks. That first half of the class is hard, and it often spills over a little bit. Sometimes some of the deadlines get pushed a little. That could happen here again. But in the third part, we spent a lot of time talking about maps and visualization. And the aim is for you to understand what a kind of place-centered or space-centered history looks like, to know what geographical information systems are, the basics of GIS, and to do a little bit of work with a very simplistic web-based GIS. And some of you may have worked with maps before with maybe more sophisticated tools, that is really rad and super cool. But we emphasize here relatively low-level tools so you have a better sense of what is actually happening in those maps. And the final section is on oral history and crowdsourcing, in which I want to encourage you to think about how to work with non-textual media to appreciate what changes when we try to collaborate uh, with with people we don't know in a crowdsourcing situation, and what happens when amateur historians invest their energy in historical narratives. And I want you also to think about your own professional or independent history future as a digital historian. So, by the end of this course, you should be able to describe to others what the phrase digital humanities means to you. You should be able to frame a coherent and nuanced argument of your own about the value of DH methods to the field of history, to be able to clearly state and defend a position regarding engaged scholarship and articulate the relationship of your argument to the contemporary media landscape, have a basic understanding of markup languages and their use in digital humanities, be able to read and navigate basic JavaScript programs, and be able to make compelling use of media materials such as audio, video, and animation in your historical arguments. All right. That's what the course is about. If you have read the syllabus, probably the thing you want to hear me talk about is the grading method. So I use this bizarre grading method, which is called specifications grading. I like it. Students who actually end up taking my class often really like it. Some people, when they look at it, they're like, forget it. So I want you to go into this with your eyes open. Here's how the grading method works. You decide what grade you want. And then you have to do the assignments that allow you to get that grade. Those assignments are all pass-fail. So it's very straightforward to know whether or not you're on track. It's, did you pass the required assignments for the grade that you want? The thing is, the kind of hitch is that a passing mark on any assignment is a very high mark, on the order of a B+. So it's very easy to fail. A lot of people fail these technical assignments. If you fail the first time, you have a chance to try again. So your letter grade is determined by what assignments you take on, and the plus minus on your letter grade is set by your participation. So I have this table in the syllabus. You have seen it, and you can see that, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see my cursor, but hopefully you can, that for a D, you need to do 4 assignments. For a C, you need to do 5. For a B, you need to do 6. And for an A, you need to do 7. Here's another way to say it. To pass, you need to do these 4 assignments. To get a C, you add 1. To get a B, you add another. And to get an A, you add 2 more. It's a lot. Yeah, maybe I should say something more about this. I set it up this way with the thought that not everybody gets an A. I was a B+ student a lot of the time when I was undergraduate. And I think if you're not really interested in digital history, you should think about like a B+ as a really, totally fine grade to get. On the other hand, if you're just in here for the credit, this might be a somewhat harder class than others to just barely, scrape by in, because even though you don't have to do all the work, the work that you do have to do is, has to be performed to a relatively high standard. All right, in terms of participation, thinking about like, plus minus on the scale. What it means to participate is to come every time, and if we continue to use PB Collaborate, it will tell me whether or not you're there. You got to pay attention and participate, ask questions. While you're in class, you got to like show up and demonstrate that you're attending, and that you're paying attention. And in Slack, you have to participate in a helpful way. Asking questions is one thing. Um, Showing that you are helpful to others is another. We have 2 assignments in the first 2 weeks. They are not easy in some ways. And in some ways, they're the first one especially is kind of easy. Um, but there's a lot of setup before you start. Um, they have not yet been posted. And that's because there are new features in the platform that I'm using that potentially will make your lives a lot easier. I am trying to make use of them uh, just today, and if I am able to do so, then you'll be very happy. Anyway, I will be kind of showcasing at least the first of these 2 assignments in class. All right, before class on Tuesday, make sure you get a user account at the GitHub service. Make sure you join the GitHub classroom, and make sure you join Slack. The first 2 links are public in the PDF or whatever web version of this. I don't know yet how I'm going to distribute it. The Slack invite will be sent separately. Okay, and there are 2 things I would like you to do. If you can possibly do these before Tuesday morning, that'll be great, and I'll be able to kind of know a little bit about who you are. In Slack, in the general channel, which is the channel that you're automatically enrolled in when you sign up, introduce yourself. Say something in a way that includes your name, your year, your majors, your interest in the class, and something potentially about yourself that will help us all remember that the name on the screen is a real live person. And then, maybe you get to this before your class, or maybe you do it after class. In another channel called Project Fantasies, I want you to imagine a digital history project. And then, after you've done that, take a look and see what other people have proposed and comment on their ideas. Remembering and learning to thread your comments using the start a thread icon, which looks like a little bit like an idea box, an idea balloon. And you will find that by the original idea post. Okay, as always, that went longer than I wanted to, but I hope it helped a little bit, and I will